Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danielle, and I am here with Ken.
Hey guys, what's happening?
So today we are going to dive right into it. We are going to be talking about Airbnb.
Yes, short-term rentals.
Yep, short-term rentals. We get a lot of questions about this and a lot of DMs about this. And Joseph on YouTube said that he has been considering switching his long-term rental into an Airbnb.
Yeah. So Airbnb is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I like it a lot. It's been around since 2008, if you can believe that.
Wow.
It's been around for 12
years. I think it
years.
started as like couches, right? They were couch surfers and stuff.
Yeah. So it's kind of it is cool. I mean, obviously it's kind of a household name now, but the reality of it is just a managed platform for short-term rentals, and they don't charge the people any fees to go on it. I think most of the people know this. You're either a guest or a host, and now they even have these super hosts. But the big thing that, I always tell people around Airbnb, because the reason most people look at it, why do you think that is?
Well, they get more per night. They get more per month.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
So that's the issue.
That's very alluring to people. Like,
you just got to focus on that. So I had the same issue when we were talking about assisted care facilities. People are like, we're gonna, we get 4,000 a night, or 4,000, 5,000 a month. I mean, on these assisted care facilities, whereas maybe the normal rent would be 1,000 or 2,000, let's say. And I, and so they would make the numbers work, but then there's a lot behind it.
They always make the numbers work on Airbnb at full occupancy.
Yeah. So, right. And that's kind of the point. Yeah. So listen, I have nothing against this, guys. Like, I think it's a great resource for people. Like, if you can monetize places to sleep, why don't you? Like, it's interesting. I was looking on Airbnb recently, and they have boats. They have houseboats. There's one up at a lake I was looking at. There's actual boat in a slip, so you get the entire boat in the slip. They have RVs. I saw this one house in Montana. It was a beautiful home, and the guy had 2 RV pads and RVs, and so it's open. You can rent a castle.
Well, Nicole from Premium said, she rents out one of those tiny homes in her backyard for Airbnb.
Yeah, so that part is really cool and creative, I think, and it's a true side hustle. But the point is if you're trying to make the numbers work by only having Airbnb, I think that can be a mistake depending on where it is. So obviously, if you're right in the heart of Maine, in an area that's always high, demand, and the hotels are always full, like let's say Coronado, California, or Coronado Island, or something like that.
Right. I
get it. But generally, you got to be careful, I think, on how you underwrite these.
Well, there's a few things, So I was kind of looking into it, and with an Airbnb, when you start the Airbnb, there's a bigger upfront cost because you're providing all the furniture, all the silverware, the basic, condiments and things for food. So there are things that you're kind of throwing this big upfront cost on that you normally wouldn't have to do in a long-term rental.
Yeah. And there's that, of course, and obviously that's going to command your rate, and also in a good way, kind of like Amazon does with books. You get rated based on the condition and
definitely
the experience and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's very fair. It's oftentimes these rates are less than hotels. So I would think that as number one, you're going to want to make sure that your rate's significantly below a hotel, because if you're competing against a hotel, unless you're a whole home.
Or if you're a large home and things. But there's things to consider. I mean, you have to pay all the utilities, unlike you would on a normal rental. It can be seasonal. Like I know in Phoenix where we're at, you have busy season, and then the summer you're going to have to account for the vacancies.
Yep. Same thing with the skiing areas. I've rented actually whole homes off of Airbnb through, for skiing for weeks at a time. And, the cool part about Airbnb is oftentimes these are spots where, hotels are not.
Right.
So these are areas, like we're going up the Oregon coast, and there's not a lot of hotels up along the Oregon coast. There are, but sometimes they're hard to rent. because they're smaller and they're always full, and so Airbnbs are really popular up through there, and people can stay, and so you got to kind of pay attention to the amount of competition in the areas.
Yeah.
So I was looking at Airbnbs in Las Vegas. And that would be a tough time.
Yeah.
I mean, but people own
People
them.
kill it on those, though.
Well, they
some
do,
of them.
But you got to imagine. I mean, if you're competing against the Mirage Hotel and they do an 89 or a 99 or a 129 rate, it's going to affect you if you own something nearby there. And so, competition is a big thing, I think, to consider.
But I think a massive advantage to the Airbnbs is you don't have to worry about evictions or rent control, especially in some of these more tenant-friendly states. You don't have to worry about evicting somebody. You don't have to worry about a rent control. You're kind of could make more money that way and be easier that way, too.
Yeah, potentially there's some of these states and cities have come after Airbnb. Like New York basically says that it's illegal to rent anything less than 30 days.
Yeah.
Period.
California's been really hard on Airbnbs
California's been hard. Santa Monica, actually, they have regulations, and investors actually must live on the property.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they must have a business license. And they need to pay 14% tax.
Well, right.
So the tax is a big thing, and that's actually what the hotels are coming after Airbnb right now on this issue, because they're saying it's largely people are avoiding the tax piece.
Yes.
And guys, this is coming. I mean,
if there's one thing that states need right now is tax money.
Yeah. So Santa Monica already passed it. Now I don't know if it's going to continue, but the point is, if you're doing some kind of transaction with somebody and you're not paying your fair share of tax, I can pretty much assure you that is coming in your future.
Well, so let's talk about something that we brought up, which is, the legalities of Airbnb. So I know, like, at my condos and homes, we are not allowed to do anything less than a 30-day rental. Yeah. But I know a lot of people do. And I think a lot of people that do Airbnb, they kind of skirt around it because nobody really enforces it. And you had that issue at some of your properties, too, where people were renting out apartments and using them as Airbnbs, right?
Yeah. This happens.
Yeah.
Listen, I love entrepreneurs, and I think this is great. And if you can make some side hustle doing this, that's great. The real issue becomes a private property rights versus, municipalities and HOAs. So what that means is you own something, and now a governing body, could be an HOA, says, sorry, you're not allowed to use it how you want. And so this is a big issue. It's coming up a lot. A lot of the HOAs passed laws to try to avoid these because, granted, I mean, it does change the dynamic of a neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're living next to an Airbnb, I mean, there's parties and there's bachelorette parties and bachelor parties and great tenants too, great just families too that aren't really very loud, but there can be a lot of that transition.
Yeah, it's going to be disruptive. And so it's an interesting battle.
Rob said he lives next to an Airbnb and he's in a lawsuit right now.
So it can be a problem, obviously, and hosts, which are the people that own these things, have had lots and lots of problems around damage and parties and things like that, and especially during the pandemic, when people, the bars and the hotels and everything closed, guys. Airbnb was on a roll.
Oh, I know people that just straight up would rent them for 30 days just to be able to have parties. Yeah.
Right. And so do I. And so all that did happen, will happen. Interesting, Airbnb as a company, the stock, I don't think they've done that well on a, financially, but, because they've been growing the whole time and you got to throw a lot of money at growth.
Right.
There's kind of a prediction that when everything kind of opens back up, that Airbnb is going to take a big hit. And you think about it, it makes sense as hotels open back up.
Yeah. And people don't have to distance anymore, and they can kind of just. Yeah.
And then the other thing is that there's a fair amount of competition coming up.
Yeah.
So VRBO, vacation rental by owner, I think it is. Is traditionally more kind of, call it
Well, they were
rural
more,
locations
and 30 days at a time. And that kind of thing.
and Airbnb's historically maybe been a little more urban, and so it'll be interesting to see. But I would expect that you're going to see more and more of these kinds of services pop up.
But I think the issue is when it comes to the regulations, if you buy a condo or a house that cash flows on that monthly rent, but you decide to try Airbnb and make some more money, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But where it gets dicey is when you pay more for a condo or house because you can cash flow off of this Airbnb money because you don't know if the state or city or whatever is going to, or HOA is going to regulate that. And then all of a sudden you're making just your monthly rent and it's not cash flowing like your Airbnb would have.
Right. So I have a lot of experience in this area. I actually had a company called Short-Term Housing. And we literally did this. So I bought, at the time, I think I had almost 200 units of furniture, and we were putting them in our places because every one of our places had a vacancy or two. So we set up a few in each location all around, and we would rent them by the night and by the week. And a lot of times when people come to a big apartment community, their parents, let's say, or their family or whatever, needs a place to stay other than maybe their place. And so we would, they did pretty well. It's not an easy business.
There's a lot of work from that.
Yeah.
But Brian from YouTube had a good question. He said, if you owned an Airbnb, what would be a good prediction of how booked you would be to calculate into your cash flow?
Yeah. So, there's, I think how you price it is up to you, but the first thing on the pricing side is you have to, and pricing determines occupancy.
Right.
So if there's a hotel in the summertime that you can rent for $150 a night, you probably need to be below that.
Well, depending on how many bedrooms and things. Yeah.
If it's a home, then of course you don't need to be. But if it's not, you do. So everything's a little bit different. So pricing is really, really important to occupancy, obviously, and then from there it's demand. Right. And so if you're on a main somewhere in an area that is highly occupied, like let's say around Disneyland or Disney World or something like that, you're probably going to do all right. Because the hotels, let's say, might be expensive. And so a family might look at some kind of an alternative to be there. So those would be great locations. And so all of that has to determine the occupancy.
Right.
And so it's a demand thing. How many people actually want your place?
But when he's calculating that for cash flow, like what would you tell him to calculate it at? 50% occupant, 25% occupied?
It's impossible to say because if you need to actually know the location and the area and the price.
Right.
But even in my world for apartments, if we have a one bedroom that's sitting vacant for a month, we know it's a pricing issue or a marketing issue or a demand issue, right? So you have all those three things, and so you just have to kind of figure that out. But obviously, you need to account for a pretty significant vacancy for turning it over. And then I think Airbnb. One of the things I read recently about Airbnb is that they're starting to people are starting to get upset around the fees.
Yeah.
The cleaning fees.
There's a cleaning fee, and I believe there's also a management fee that you as the renter pay, so that Airbnb manages you and the owner and everything, the host.
Yeah. So they're starting to get upset around that. So that can also increase the price of what you're going to pay, and so all of those things need to be considered. It's not, you can't just pick a number, but let's put it this way. If it doesn't work, you should make sure that it can work financially on a longer term basis.
And I like that, right? So exactly. Like it's very hard, Brian, to answer your question to just pick a percentage, right, of what it should be occupied. But what it should be is cash flowing if Airbnb doesn't work out and you want to put a long-term tenant in there. Because that's going to be an easier calculation to make. Yeah,
and the reason think about this, Brian. Like I'm going to Manhattan Beach this summer. Okay, I'm a block, not even a block. I'm one house off the beach. okay, as you move inward, like 10 blocks, 20 blocks, things are cheaper and they're more vacant. That's just the way it is. So, and that's in the exact same town, just 8 to 10 blocks away. So there's a perceived value for things on the location of them. And it's going to be the same for anything, anywhere, right? And so you just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And just to lastly touch on, we were starting to talk about it, but it's a lot more work. It's so much more work. That's why I don't do it.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I mean, think about this. Like, I was actually, I'm going to visit my mom in Seattle this summer. And so I looked on Airbnb, and I could rent an entire house for $200 for one night, which is all I need, right? And the reason I'm looking at that is because I have a dog, and I can't find a hotel that allows a pet. So I went to the Airbnb, that allows pets, and I ended up passing and found a hotel that will take dogs. But the point is I would have rented that house for one night. I mean, now somebody's got to come in and clean it and turn it again, and so it's just obviously you want to try to get somebody there that's going to be multiple nights.
Yeah, and then too, you always have to think of the liability when you have people coming in, and you can't help it, but people are going to have parties, and they're going to depending on who they are, and you have some liability there with that, and some destruction to your unit and those kind of things.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So if you are going to do it, I would suggest you test it. You do some minimums, like 3-night minimum, for example, or something that makes it worth your time, because it's going to upset the tenant if they pay, let's say, $100 or $200, and then they have $100 or $200 fee to clean it. And to turn it, right? So, it's not going to be a great experience all the way around. So I'm sure there's people that are listening that are, a lot more proficient at Airbnb rentals than I am. But the main thing is just to make sure that you're not relying on it for cash flow.
Right. It just should be something you're trying, but you can always go back to the...
Yeah, if it doesn't work out, hopefully it does, but if it doesn't work out, you just want to be able to make sure that you could say, okay, I'm not doing Airbnb anymore, and I'm going to just rent it long term.
And cash flow it.
Yeah.
And one more thing, because that I'm an insurance, freak or whatever, but... you want to make sure that you don't skimp on the insurance. You let your insurance company know you're doing vacation rentals, because it's a totally different kind of policy and it's more expensive. And that is because if something drastic happens and they find out it's on Airbnb and you don't have a long-term rental in there, they just won't cover it.
Yeah, it's a good point. These are not legal everywhere, and you need to check your zoning and your regulations, and also know that the cities don't like these a lot of times. Neighborhoods don't like these. HOAs don't like these.
Neighbors don't like
these. And so just don't bank your future on them. It's a night. Take it while you can and run it the best you can. But also know that it might not be a long-term strategy.
Yeah. And neighbors are all over this, because I know I moved in some long-term tenants into my house, and one of the neighbors had the audacity to go to the door and ask to see their lease to make sure that it was at least 30 days.
Oh, wow.
So neighbors are definitely on top of this. HOAs are on top of this. They're not really messing around.
Yeah. And obviously, you're better off with long-term, in my opinion. I like the stability. You don't make as much money, but I like the stability. I like not having vacancies throughout the month. I like not having to manage it. And I also like having the deposits to be able to take care of anything, when people move in or move out. And I know that's all covered on Airbnb with credit cards and all that kind of stuff. And there's, that is one of the things that comes up a lot, is damage.
Yeah, but it's still, if you have a damaged unit and they need to come in and fix it, you're losing that revenue too. So it's a thing. I mean, I just, having long-term tenants in there, if they're good tenants, it's pretty low key, pretty easy.
Yep.
So I wanted to hop in. We have some premium questions. Lauren on premium asked, you mentioned that you like first floor rentals compared to second or third floor rentals, and she wanted to understand why.
Yeah. So you just think about it. I guess it kind of depends on the tenant. So in the properties that I was speaking about specifically, it was a senior property. So it was in a senior area. And so seniors didn't like going up and down the stairs. But also, there are safety. I know single women that actually like being upstairs, right, and no one above them. And so some people like being upstairs. But if you look at the data, the majority of the people like downstairs units over, second, third floor, or even higher.
Well, yeah, you had pointed out, elderly people, which are great tenants usually, they obviously want a first floor unit. People with animals want a first floor unit. Younger people tend to not care as much, but then you're kind of limiting your...
It just depends on who they are. But I think if you just, it's not for everyone, but most people would err toward, if they had the choice, one upstairs, one downstairs, exact same unit, right above each other, they would probably take the downstairs.
Yeah.
Unless the upstairs had some amazing view off of some balcony or something like that.
Right.
But generally that's the case. And, downstairs can also be a problem from a noise standpoint with people upstairs. So sometimes people like to be upstairs.
And a security issue.
Yeah, it could be, potentially.
Can be. So Jake from Premium, he wanted to know, how do you know when you can do a value add?
Well, the value add is...
let's explain maybe what a value add is.
So what a value add is the greatest example would be maybe something that was really dated inside, and you fix it up with money, and new flooring, new appliances, new countertops, new paint, and then you charge more rent. That would be a traditional value add. It doesn't have to be related to a renovation. It could be things like we're doing. We're putting in carports in some properties, and we're charging $40, believe it or not, for these carports. We're putting in pet yards for, and people like to be able to let their pets out in their yards, and we'll charge for those. So those are all types of value adds. So there are things or improvements that you would do to something and then charge more. A washer and dryer, putting a washer and dryer into a unit would be a value add. So those are all kinds of value adds. And so the way that you look to see if they work is obviously by testing it. So if let's just stick with the washer and dryer. If the washer and dryer, if they have hookups in a unit and the people are using a laundry room, they're already spending money going up and down the stairs. Well, if you're putting that laundry set in their unit, you're going to be able to charge $40 or $50 a month because that's what they're already spending. So from their standpoint, they're just giving it to you instead of to the laundry service, as an example. But it's the same way on upgrades. It's just like, when people buy houses, flip them and renovate them and flip them for more money. It's the exact same thing. You just look at it as rent.
Yeah.
How much more can you rent something that's fully redone? More.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Now, some markets, it's not a lot more. Some markets, it's a lot more.
Yeah.
So it just depends on, but you have to test it. And sometimes you can overspend on the inside too, a lot.
Right.
So there are things that I've seen people do that you don't get any more rent for. So you just got to be kind of careful of how much you spend.
Yeah, because I know that you've said that about different units we've looked at where, if you'd redo it and get another $100 a month, if you're spending, $15,000, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and that you throw that number out, it's not a insignificant number. I mean, on a nice 3-bedroom house, you can easily spend $15,000 on the inside.
Oh, easily.
Yes. Just on probably a 40% of that is just appliance packages.
Right.
So, then you've got your labor and then you've got all this other stuff. So, especially in flooring's expensive, and flooring labor to put the flooring down and all those kinds of things, unless you're doing it yourself. But the truth is, it can be expensive. And so if you're going to spend that kind of money and then only get a marginal number back, it's not worth it.
Exactly. So our last question comes from Kara from YouTube, actually. She says she is looking into Airbnb and talking to some different management companies. So she wanted to know what you think about the Airbnb management companies. And she didn't say here, but I'm pretty sure she's talking about the people that basically, run it all for you.
Yeah.
So it's just not really any work to you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of anybody that does stuff for me. So, so if it works, great. And I don't know what their fees are, obviously, but it's just part of your net. But if it depends on what they handle. But listen, if you don't have any experience and you don't have the time, then I highly recommend that you use somebody like that. Make sure that you're getting a good deal and make sure that they're worth a damn, because they might not be.
Right.
They might just be. It might be a startup. Make sure they have some experience.
Yeah. No long-term commitments. Just month to month or 3 months or whatever.
Yeah. Give them a try. And I don't know all of what those guys usually provide, but if they, Airbnb is a cheap service. I think you actually list for free, and there's an annual fee or something.
I think they pay like 3% per booking.
It's really cheap. So you getting your stuff up there, taking photos and all that kind of stuff is not very hard. I wouldn't pay a company to do all that stuff. So it would be interesting to see what they actually do. Maybe they manage the tenant while they're there, and
maybe the maids while they flip everything.
And then that's probably worth it, unless you have kind of all that in house. But for the most part, I think that if you don't have the time, definitely use a management company.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in today. If you want to join Premium, go to kenmcelroy.com/premium. We always answer all your premium questions, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.